Good evening. I'm Kenyatta Mitchell, and I'm the chairperson of Georgia Equality's Board of Directors. Thank you for joining us tonight as we continue our Invest in Equality's online event series. Tonight, in honor of Georgia Equality's 25th anniversary and the 19th Amendment's 100th birthday, we'll be joined by an esteemed group of women to discuss the work that has gotten us to this point in the movement for LGBTQ equality in Georgia, and what work is left to be done. Before I get to introductions, I'd like to recognize our sponsors and host committee, the members whose donations make Georgia Equality's work possible. Presenting sponsor is the Coca-Cola Company. Gold sponsor is Georgia Power. Silver sponsors are Making Projects Work, Cox Enterprises, and Wells Fargo. To see the full list of supporters, or to become a supporter yourself, you can visit www.georgiaequality.org/invest. Now I'm delighted to introduce our first panel. Tonight on our panel, we will have Kathy Willard, Melanie Thompson, and Jamie Roberts, all phenomenal women who have helped us accomplish all of the goals that we have set for ourselves over the past 25 years. They will be the panel that's going to look back at what we've done in the past, so I hope you enjoy. Well, good afternoon. So I wanted to ask y'all the first question, and this is going to be very conversational, but I just want to find out, what was it like? We're 25 years old now, so what was it like to be LGBTQ in Georgia 25 years ago? So anyone start? Jamie, so I'm looking at you.
25 years ago, I was still trying to wrap my mind around like what to do about, being trans. It was 25 years ago. I was like 3 years before I affirmatively began a transition, and so I was definitely trying to figure things out. I graduated college in Milledgeville in 1994, and I moved to Atlanta, and I was married at the time, and I was still trying to figure things out, and it would be several years later that I could even talk to my wife at the time about it. So I was in the wilderness between Athens, Milledgeville, and Athens and Atlanta.
So 25 years ago, I was, 24 years ago, I ran for office for the first time. Believe it or not, that seems like just yesterday. And we had no rights, zero. We were I guess Melanie will probably speak to this, but we were not at the worst part of the AIDS crisis, but we certainly weren't in a good place. We just had a lot of work to do, and the need for Georgia Equality and its predecessor organization, Gay PAC, which is more, I think, Georgia PAC, not GAY PAC, but it was a handy name. We had a lot of things to do about that time.
Yeah, and I'll pick up from there, Kathy, because that really was a bad time in the HIV epidemic. That was 1995, 25 years ago. It was before we really had the powerful drugs that we had today, which really began to come out like in 1996. So HIV was a huge part of the LGBTQ community in the early 90s and of course the late 80s. And I think by 1995, I had seen hundreds of people die from AIDS. And I was taking care of hundreds of people with HIV and AIDS, and really had the fear that we would lose them too. And it was a time when we had some medicines, but not enough to keep people alive. And, these were largely gay and bisexual men There were some cis women and trans women at that time in my practice. But, you know, this was a time when our community was just reeling. And it contrasts to me with what we're going through now, in that stigma was killing people then. And it is still killing people now. And it's one of those things that we really haven't quite gotten rid of in dealing with our HIV epidemic, because the stigma was extreme then. It kept people from coming out as being gay or bisexual. It kept them from getting tested. It kept them from getting care and from staying in care, and it hastened their death. And, you know, sadly, we still see that very same thing happening today, largely among younger gay and bisexual men and trans women in particular people of color. So, you know, it was really a bad time. And then in 1996, we got some drugs and people started living instead of dying. And it was amazing. It was an amazing rebirth that happened for people, those who were lucky enough to still be around in 1996. And I think it really had a huge impact on our community at that time. And Georgia Equality really was there early on to help us with our legal fights, the fights of people living with HIV who, as Kathy said, had no rights as gay and bisexual people. Georgia Equality helped us with fights against the ADAP waiting list, so the AIDS Drug Assistance Program that provided drugs for people living with HIV. And we had a huge waiting list. And, you know, Georgia Equality was a really important partner in that fight. So a lot of things have changed. The plague years were awful. We still have our own plague going on now. But, you know, I think we have to be joyous about the wonderful things that have happened for our community since then. And yet, you know, cautious that that these things can be taken away from us.
You know, I was just talking with my wife the other day, and we had this conversation on a kind of a cyclical basis, but just thinking about the men that we lost during that time, who are just incredible people, and they're not here today to be part of telling this story. But, you know, when I think about GayPAC, again, the organizations were really seamless. There wasn't, you know, sort of a dramatic takeover or something. There were just changes along the way. And I was, you know, became an activist probably about 6 or 7 years earlier than that. And, you know, was a young woman. I was probably in my late 20s at the time. And, you know, there were a number of men, and I'm going to say two of them, Ken Marshall and Judd Herndon, who were both lawyers. Judd was white and I think he was from Charleston. He had that really interesting Charleston accent, and he was very, you know, very dedicated to things, to making change. And Ken Marshall was an African-American man who was a lawyer. They were both very active in BWMT, Black and White Men Together. They were not a couple. And each of them took me under their wing and, you know, kind of pushed me, push isn't really quite the right word, but encouraged me along to be active. And I just adored those two men. And, you know, they're not here for me to say thank you or to say, no, what, you know, I was around for a long time, but they were around before me. And I could name many, many, many more guys that we lost along the way.
And I think I have a similar experience in that I became an activist because I had to be. And, you know, my patients taught me to be an activist, and my friends. So, you know, as we were losing people in the community and we were fighting against such stigma, such a terrible government, you know, you couldn't just be a physician and see people in the office. You really had to get out in the streets and advocate. You really had to fight. And, you know, it's HIV has always been a story of social justice. And, you know, our LGBTQ community has always been intertwined with the fight for social justice as well.
So in that vein, I wanted to talk a little bit about, we talked a bit about the men in the movement and those gentlemen who really were people who stood behind both of you, or all three of you. I know that the LGBTQ movement is seen as being very white male based and white male focused. Has that been your experiences? And also, you know, what's it like to be a woman in the movement? Have there been any particular issues that each of you have experienced being a woman in this movement?
Hey, Jamie, jump in.
Yeah, I mean, the experience, the way I experienced life before my transition was very different from the way I experienced life after transition. And especially being a lawyer, like practicing outside of Atlanta in places like Macon, Georgia, and LaGrange, Georgia. You know, I got to experience kind of the other side, you know, just not being taken as seriously, experience, you know, having your, not getting credit for things that I accomplish, have other people getting credit for things that I accomplish, you know, getting mansplained. So, yeah, I mean, it's been a journey. At the same time, I've definitely met a lot of folks along the way who have been sort of mentors, and especially in the legal profession, there have been women, especially who have kind of stepped up to be mentors, not necessarily LGBTQ, but, you know, straight cisgender women. Some of them have been very kind, and so I'm lucky for that.
Yeah, you know, I think about all of those fundraisers that I went to, LGBTQ fundraisers, HIV fundraisers early on. And, you know, it seems like they were all white gay men in tuxes. And, you know, there were not a lot of women. There were not a lot of Black, Latinx, Asian people in the room. And in fact, I think some of the organizations really had no idea about what the role of women could be in their organizations. And, you know, after a while, I kind of felt like, you know, maybe I'll just write a check and not go to this banquet with the rubber chicken and all the guys in their tuxes, even though I love the men, you know, they're my friends, I love them. But it didn't feel particularly that welcoming. And then along the way, I made some decisions about, gee, maybe I won't write checks to the organizations where they're really not including women and they're not including people of color. And so, you know, I think it was very much a white man's community early on. And, you know, as with many things, women have sort of had to prove our worth, to fight, to be in the leadership. And you know, when I look at, for example, Evening with Equality, which very sadly we can't have this year, you know, I think about how far we've come in terms of diversity in Georgia. Equality has really done a great job in increasing diversity over time. And, you know, you go there and you see the fullness of our community now, and it feels great.
You know, my passion, no surprise in this group, because we have known each other for a while, has been politics. And so to be involved in politics, certainly before the last couple of years, really, and including this year, you know, I often found myself to be not only the only woman in the room, but even when I was around women who were friends, they weren't necessarily interested in it, because I think women felt, you know, not a part of it. So why even spend much time investing in it or thinking about it? not that women weren't interested in politics, we were just expressing our politics in different kinds of ways, organizing in different ways, and organizing around more feminist issues and things like that. And, you know, so it's been an, you know, we could go back quite some years to really think about that. But I just kind of took it as a, you know, just sort of, to use Donald Trump's words, it is what it is, right? You know, it was just like, and if I was going to be in politics, I had to get used to being in this male arena, you know, and so I did. And, you know, to go back and talk about sort of the whiteness of the movement is, you know, is also some, you know, interesting history that, you know, isn't very flattering, but it's also the story of people of privilege being able to come out faster than people who had more to lose. And so when you think about an organization like the Human Rights Campaign, their initial board were people whose last names were Hormel and Bloomingdale. And, you know, if I had a better memory, I'd come up with the rest of them. But, you know, it was certainly a surprise to me, because I didn't even, you know that there were like out gay people in, you know, in a group like that. And we also had, you know, that kind of AIDS movement that was part of the LGBT movement, but also its own thing. And so, you know, it's not an excuse for that, but there's definitely a narrative of the history, and it just relates back to the oppression that LGBT people felt in that time frame, and how much risk there was for anybody to come out. I mean, when I made the decision to come out, the corollary decision I made was, and if people in my family, the people closest to me, don't like it, I am prepared to lose them forever. That was like what I had to tell myself in the late 80s, because I was going to be a little more public in things, just because I was. And, you know, that's a lot to lose. And if you are a person who is even more marginalized because your race or your religion, or because you're trans, you know, it's, you know, it could well be too much, and it may well have been too much for me, but I got lucky. I caught the wave of the movement at a time when I was able to come out more safely than I would have maybe 10 years sooner.
I can also say that, you know, I was living my first job out of law school. I graduated in 99, and that was down in Macon. And I was actually working for a grant with the Georgia Legal Services to do legal work for people with HIV. And I was working with Central City AIDS Network down there, and Johnny Fambro, the founder of that, who passed away several years ago. But after I left that position in 2004, that was around the time of the marriage amendment fight. And I remember meeting a lot of people that have become lifelong friends, a lot of women I met through that movement, when they had an office on the corner of College and like Sam's Crossing and Decatur. And I met people like DePauli Gokhale, who started a group called the Queer Progressive Agenda. She lives in DC area now, but also people like Asha Leong, who lives here in East Lake Commons. Kathy probably met her last time you were here. And yeah, and also Kathy Kelly was you know, one of the leaders in that fight, and she went on to form Marriage Equality Georgia, which functioned for several years after 2004. And she invited me to become part of the board of that. And so I spent several years before I joined the board of Georgia Equality. It was working with folks like Kathy Kelly. That was kind of my introduction to at least the community and activist community and women's community in Atlanta.
So question for each of you, being that it is our 25th anniversary of Georgia Equality, what do you see for Georgia Equality in the future? What's going to be our role gosh, I can't even think about 2045 or 2040. Yeah, wow, 2045. Still in that math, and I was like, that can't be right, but it's right.
Well, my area is health, and I think that Georgia Equality has played a very strong role in advocacy for health, the health of our community and all communities. And I think we have a very long way to go to ensure that we provide a healthcare safety net for everyone in this country. It particularly affects LGBTQ populations that we do not have access to quality and affordable health care. And so I think Georgia Equality will continue to be in that battle for expanding Medicaid in states like Georgia, fighting for federal bills that will bring us affordable health care across the board. And then the other piece is, of course, that other pandemic that has never gone away, HIV, and the recent efforts to infuse more money into ending the HIV epidemic have been great, but I think all of our efforts are threatened now, not only by COVID, but by the administration that is currently in office. And I think we need Georgia Equality to help us fight this fight to ensure that we have funding to take care of people living with HIV, and that we have funding to prevent people from acquiring HIV. We do have the ability to end the HIV epidemic, but it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be fast, and it's going to take us, 10 to 15 years in Georgia, I think, to make that a reality. Certainly at the current rate, we're not even close. But I think Georgia Equality can play a huge role in ensuring our health, our access to health care, to reproductive justice, women having control of their bodies. Every aspect of healthcare to me is a social justice issue, and we need advocates like Georgia Equality.
Yeah, I think there's a big role for Georgia Equality, especially statewide. There's still, during this Trump administration, overall societal approval of things like same-sex marriage and stuff like that has fallen. There's an attack on trans people that's coming, despite the Supreme Court ruling that we got. There's a movement to enshrine bigotry in the name of religious freedom, and especially in the South, we're definitely the front lines of that struggle, and that struggle is not over by a long shot. And so I think, Georgia Equality has a role to play in statewide organizing, grassroots organizing, and, standing up. And I think they also have a role in standing up organizations that can serve people all over state, especially in the smaller cities and rural areas. I know certainly Georgia Equality, I think, has learned a lot of lessons, from the experience with the Rush Center. And I think can apply a lot of those lessons to some other places statewide. There's organizations in Savannah, on the coast, they could use support and training and expertise. And, there's an epidemic of violence still against LGBTQ people, especially Black trans men. And, I think Georgia Equality has a role, speaking of healthcare, of keeping queers out of the hospital, and I think, and there's some racism and patriarchy involved in that we can work on as well.
Well, speak softly and have a big pack. I think, having Georgia Equality has long had a political action committee, has endorsed candidates, has helped people get elected. both LGBT people and progressive candidates in general. And I think that's a real need. It's unique among the organizations in terms of what Georgia Equality does. I think it can become even bigger and even better at that. We still don't have a civil rights bill, and Georgia Equality has been working to advance local civil rights ordinances. So we're at 10 now. We'll probably have 3 or 4 in the coming weeks. And, you know, certainly in the next half dozen years, I would expect this to be something that we see at a state level. And it's so vital to have people have the outlet to help end discrimination in their communities through the law. And Georgia Equality is at the forefront of that. In fact, you know, really leading the way on there with the help of local elected officials. So I think there's an awful lot for the organization to do. And what's unique about Georgia Equality is its longevity amongst organizations, and under the leadership most recently, and it's been a while now, Jeff Graham, has a reputation among funders, among donors, of managing funds well, you know, managing its programs well and getting results. And that's not easy. You know, it takes a lot. It takes good board members, good staff people to make that happen. And I am really hoping that we see the evolution of Georgia Equality over the next 25 years to grow bigger and better and address the problems that are in front of both our community, but the larger community here in Georgia.
So the final thing I'd like to talk about is, we talked a lot about marginalized communities. We talked a lot about men in the movement. So I want to really spend the last moment talking about unsung women, right? So who are some of the women of the movement who, I always think about like Diane Nash in the civil rights movement, who is a pivotal figure, but we just do not say her name enough. And that's in the African-American civil rights history. Who in the LGBTQIA civil rights history do y'all think would be someone who you'd like to speak very briefly about and just say what they've done, why they are important, and why we need to really spend time uplifting those folks that we don't talk about a lot, primarily women?
I'll jump in. So my personal hero from a long time back was Congresswoman Barbara Jordan from Texas. She was riveting in the Watergate hearings about Richard Nixon. And I wasn't terribly politically active when that happened, but I watched those hearings because they were unprecedented in this country. We have a lot of unprecedented stuff going on now, but at the time, the excesses were, by comparison, minimal, but shocking. And she was so incredibly smart and so well respected, and just, you know, like, she was the Watergate hearings. I don't remember anybody else who spoke. And she wasn't out at the time. That didn't come till later, but I think we all know that gay people recognize each other. We say it's gaydar, but it's something, you know. And when I saw her, I saw something about me, and I have just loved her and missed her. She died prematurely, as y'all know, but maybe other people don't. She had, I think she had MS, and she died in her swimming pool alone, which is a tragic death for somebody who had so much to offer, and have no doubt that she would have been a vice president or a president if she had lived and been healthy. But not to monopolize, Bobby, really quick, I also want to give a shout out to the Atlanta Lesbian Feminist Alliance, which was a group of lesbians who had a communal house on McClendon Avenue. I landed in Atlanta. My family's from here, but I came back from the Peace Corps, and like a homing pigeon, found myself at the Alpha House, and found the softball team I needed to find, and then found the bars, and, you know, then found women, and, you know, bless their hearts. Thank you, Alpha House. You have your laugh on mute, Kenyatta.
I know. Jamie or Melanie?
So, to me, what I think about are, rather than the voices of people whose names we know, I think about the voices of the people whose names we don't know. And, watching the Democratic Convention over the last few days, what's been most moving to me, other than, the obvious big speeches from, our legends, the Obamas and so on, but it's been the normal people who are telling their stories that has really been so moving to me. And that's what I think about when I think about the unsung heroes and the people who are every day living their lives, maybe without any sort of a spotlight, the lesbian women in the rural South who are making a difference in their own lives, in their own neighborhoods, in their own businesses, without a lot of fanfare. And, the trans women who are for the first time helping other people experience what it means to be trans because they know them and they are telling their own story, and they don't have to be on the stage of a convention or, the leader of an organization or, anything, but the impact that people make when they tell their stories is really so, so striking. And, my wife is, a business executive who basically has been the only woman in most of her business experiences for 30 or so years, and the only gay person. And when I think about the lives she has touched, the people she has changed just by being there, by telling her own story, being herself, making people laugh, impressing people with her skills. I just think that there are so many people out there who are changing the world every day, and we don't know their names, but we need to be in search of them and lift them up, actually, because this is who we are.
Yeah, I'd like to lift up some folks that I've known for a long time. Like, when I first came out as trans in the late 90s, it was people like Aaron Swenson, who was leading Atlanta Gender Explorations, in Dallas Denny, who was a founding member of Transsexual Menace. And through them, I met folks like Dee Dee Chambly of Legender, who's a longtime survivor of HIV and is still doing great things through the Solutions Not Punishment Coalition and Legender. And I also met, through Dee Dee, I also met Cheryl Courtney Evans, who also had her organization, Transgender Individuals Living Your Truth. And sadly, she passed away a couple of years ago. But she has a successor named Samaya Fogel, who's an amazing person. And so look for her. She's a woman on the rise. And also people like Annalise Singh, Dr. Annalise Singh, who is a psych professor from UGA, who's done a lot of work on trans resilience. Also, Simone Bell is a huge inspiration. She was I volunteered for her campaign a lot. There was a lot of trans women working on that campaign, I can tell you. What was it, 2010? Or was it, gosh, has it been that long? Yeah. And, yeah, and now she's in this fight, leading the Georgia effort for the Biden campaign. Just an amazing person, and also her partner Val, and just amazing folks. Let's see, Darlene Hudson with the Southern Unity Movement. The Russ and Lord Breakfast is another long time kind of thing that's been an event that's been happening around Martin Luther King, and Darlene's been an organizer of that for a long time. And so, these are the folks that kind of brought me into the movement and embraced me. And I'm really grateful for that.
So I just want to throw in host privilege and bring up Joan Gardner, who I absolutely adore, absolutely love. She is an unsung hero. She has her nice little picture up on Peachtree, but I think that that's just not nearly enough for her. So just wanted to say her name as well. Thank you all. This has been a phenomenal panel. Any parting words before we walk away?
Well, thank you for your
Vote.
Georgia Equality, Kenyatta. You've been on the board in various capacities for a long time now, and that stability has mattered, and it's a lot of work. So thank you for that.
No, it's the least I can do, the very, very least I can do. So thank you all. I guess we'll cut here. So I will go ahead and say good evening to everyone and good evening to each of my panelists, and thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Good night, y'all.
All right.
Vote. Go vote.
Yes,
Go
vote,
vote.
vote.
Early and often.
Bye.
Hi, good evening, everybody. So I would like for everyone to kind of go around and introduce themselves very briefly and how they got involved in Georgia Equality. So Patricia, since I'm looking at you, go ahead.
Hey, sounds good. I'm Patricia Lassiter. I am chiming in today from Columbus, Georgia. I'm a longtime volunteer with Georgia Equality. I'm currently on the board and hopefully represent a little geographic diversity here.
Well, Justine.
Hi, I'm Justine Ingram. I currently reside in Stockbridge, Georgia. I started at Georgia Equality in 2017 as an intern, and now I am on the board. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Kim, Senator-elect Jackson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Jackson. I will be the senator-elect for District 41, but I've been involved with Georgia Equality for several years. I'm also an Episcopal priest. I'm a pastor, and so I've had the great privilege of lobbying and advocating on behalf of justice for the LGBTQ community with Georgia Equality for several years.
And Kenyatta Mitchell, I've been on the board for, I think, my whole life, but it's been at least 10 years. I have been chair of the C3, the C4, and back to the C4 again, so I can't leave. So that is me, but I wanted to go ask you ladies a few questions about your experience in the future. So what you think the future of Georgia equality and equality in Georgia is going to be. So my first question is, the first panel talked about their experiences with the very white dominated LGBTQ movement that had been going on for years. What have your experiences been? And have the necessary changes occurred to be successful in the future? And anyone jump in?
I'll start just by saying, so I moved to Atlanta in 2006, and I came out at that same time. And I remember going to some type of LGBTQ event, and it was basically me and all white men. Like that's what it was. And, you know, I can get down with white gay men, and I do often, but that was me a moment of saying, oh, like this isn't really for me. And I'm happy to say that, you know, here we are 15 years later, and I go to LGBTQ events all the time. And I think most people actually end up looking like me. They're often female and queer. And so that transition has been incredible. And it's also very encouraging. I also feel like it reflects Georgia's own transition in terms of, I mean, we are a growing minority majority, if we're going to use that language, state. And so I think that the LGBTQ movement has begun to reflect that and look like that. And so I've been thrilled to be a part of that transition and to see that more Black and brown folks are getting involved with the movement.
Thank
I think
you.
the movement has always looked like us, but you'd never reflected that in magazines, on the news or anything. We've always been here. We've always been advocating for our rights and for the rights of others, because we cannot compartmentalize. And so when we have called to the organizations like Georgia Equality, like different organizations, to say, you don't need to reflect who's out there. And that's what we're seeing now. And it's not just in the metro cities, because people that are in the metro areas are just people that came from the rural areas and so we need geographic diversity. We have diversity from all over the state, and people that have come out to work hard for us have always looked like us. And so it's up to us now to reflect it.
Mm-hmm. And I just think for myself, I am pretty new to this field. I just came with advocacy maybe 3 years ago. But what I can talk from is from a standpoint of being a consumer. So I know years ago when I first started and looking for services and help, a lot of these organizations and advocacy organizations were ran by white gay men. So when I came into the field again as more or less as a leader, I did start seeing a big change in who representation was. I myself, as a trans woman of color, I know that lately I have been pushed up just to get into more leadership roles and to offer more diversity. So just being able to continue to see that progress so that other folks who look like me or may identify as me will have those same opportunities as well.
So thank y'all. So another question I have is, there's clearly a younger generation of people, of LGBTQ folks, who are rising up for not only their own rights, but for the rights of other marginalized communities, which I think is phenomenal. In your mind, how does the securing LGBTQ rights intersect with the rights of other marginalized groups?
Well, for me, I just think that being realistic, a lot of the LGBT right activists, they kind of laid the groundwork for those popular Black Lives Matter movements that we have now. So just seeing that queer and trans and lesbian cisgender women, they actually was out on the groundwork and laying down those tracks for it. So just to see like other movements being able to arise and know that that kind of came from the backs of queer and trans and gay and lesbian folks is amazing. And then also I feel like we, as the younger generation, I hope I can speak to it, but we, as the younger generation, we have like a different viewpoint on the world. So I know for a lot of us and a lot of my peers, we hear about things and we read about it in history books, but we may not experience that. So I know with me growing up, I was seeing things on MTV of gay couples and lesbians. So those are the type of images that I see. And I think that that instilled not only into me, but into a lot of my peers to kind of continue that movement.
And I mean, absolutely, it's seen more, and it's seen more because of the people that came before us. And once again, even though they may not have been able or free or legally free to identify as queer back then, we were always there. We were always there. We've been on on women's rights, on disability rights, everything. Sometimes we were not able to identify because, we want to go to jail and that kind of stuff. So we're here now, and the fact that we have come into our own, once again, we're modeling everyone else to do the same. And it's I'm not as young as people apparently think I am. I've seen a whole lot, and so I've seen the changes, but and I'm so grateful to the people that came before me that were alone out there or felt alone out there, because we don't feel as alone out there. The struggles are the same, but we can find our community now, and it feels so good. But I can't go a single day without being in awe of the people that came before me, those that have lived to see this day, those have not lived to see this day. And I'm grateful every day, and I hope that I'm doing them some kind of, I'm making them proud.
Yeah.
Well, you are.
I think a lot about, there's a saying that when Black women are free, then we all will be free. And I think what's perhaps even more true is that when Black queer women are free, when Black trans lives matter, we all will be free. And that to me is where the intersections lie, is that as we seek to see people and to also make sure that people have the rights to be who they are, that ultimately that makes everything better for all of us. So, I think about the metaphor of the curb cutout. So there was a time period in which when you were walking down the streets of cities, the curbs were just all had curbs. And if you were in a wheelchair, then you had a problem. But we made curb cutouts, and that granted access, but it's not just those who are in wheelchairs who use that, right? If you're pushing a stroller or a dolly or got luggage behind you, we all use those curb cutouts. It's all benefited us. And I think that's what we're seeing with the LGBT movement, as we've gotten rights to marry, that has ultimately opened up so much more for other people as we continue to secure rights around employment protections. That also will ultimately benefit all of us and make us a better world. And so, the intersections are so there. And I also think key is that, and Patricia, you said this so well, like, queer folks have been fighting for all the rights, right? Because we recognize that we sit at the intersections of all of those things. Many of us are people of color. We do experience disabilities. We do have immigration issues, right? Like, we are everywhere. We sit at all those intersections, and therefore every time we fight for immigration rights, like, those are LGBT issues too. And so we're there. And I think that's just really important to highlight.
No, I love that thought, because you're right. I think for so long we've looked at rights as being siloed. Like, this is the women's movement. This is the Black movement. This is the immigrant movement. This is, and we don't live in those silos. I love what y'all have all brought up there, is that, we are all minority women. Those all carry with them issues. Whether or not we're cisgender or not, those carry issues. There's so many things that become fights, that the more that we're able to come together and speak with one voice, if I'm able to stand up, as an ally to the movement and speak for the movement, and y'all are able to stand up and speak for the issues that I have at hand, it only helps us all, and it only helps us all equally. I always joke that no one gets a right taken away because they fought for someone else's right. It just doesn't happen that way. I always joke, my husband and I have been together, between dating and marriage 25 years, and we didn't suddenly get divorced when gays were able to get married. I know, shocker, but we've been able to stay together. It doesn't hurt anybody for another person to have a right. And I love when people, I love that people are starting to realize that rights are buildable and not subtractable. So kind of, what are your hopes and dreams for this movement as we go on? So we're right now in 2020, and 2020 has been a heck of a year. But how do y'all think about this movement in 2025, 2035? What goals do you think the community is going to meet? And what role do you think that Georgia Equality is going to have in kind of that further movement, pushing Georgia into more of a progressive, not progressive in the political sense, but progressive in the social justice openness sense?
Georgia has, Georgia is, as far as the queer community goes, I think that we are one of the top states when it comes to raising children and having families. And so we are, it's our chosen families, it's our biological families. We are raising the next generation right now. A lot of us queers are doing that. And so we need to do it correctly. And so in the next 25 years, they're going to be running this organization, and they don't need to learn how to run the organization once they get grown. They need to get into it from the strollers on, or when they find their chosen family. And
Right.
so, of course, in 25 years, when Georgia Equality will be 50, I hope that we are a relic and that we're just sitting around celebrating everything that we're doing. We're going to be run by people that look more like us than anybody else. We're going to represent everyone. We're going to do it very, very well. But there's no way of knowing, because we're going to grow so much. And the mistakes that we're making right now and that we're remedying right now, we won't do again. And so the people that come behind us are going to do better, or they're going to make their own mistakes, and then the people that come behind them are going to do better. And so it's kind of like when the segregated baseball leagues, they're gone now, but we need to celebrate them. And so the people are going to remember us like we hope that we remembered everyone else. But Georgia should look like us in 25 years. Actually, they should look like us next year.
I think it kind of is starting to look like us now, actually. It really is, when you look at the percentages.
I think about the protests that I've been attending this summer as we've fought for Black lives. And at every protest that I've been to, the names of trans women, Black trans women, have been called, those who have been killed in just this year alone. We name them aloud, and 25 years from now, we won't be doing that. Like that's what success is. 25 years from now, we won't have to do a roll call of trans women who've been murdered, because we won't be murdering trans women anymore, right? 25 years from now, that just won't be the work. Instead, we will simply celebrate where people are. I think a lot about where Georgia is politically and legislation. So right now, so many of our protections that we have in terms of rights and access, those are dependent upon the federal level. But I think that Georgia Equality is poised, and other folks along with Georgia Equality are poised to make sure that we codify within our own state law protections for LGBTQ folks, so that it's not just, and it won't be city by city, right? Like right now, all of our anti-discrimination laws seem to be happening, cobbling them together city by city by city. But Georgia Equality in the next 25 years, and it won't take 25 years, will really do the work to help push us to make sure that those protections are codified for us on the state level. And I look forward to that work. And I also think that within the next 25 years, we'll see some real, some intersections around prison and criminal justice reform. Oftentimes, I don't know that we remember that is an LGBTQ issue, but it very much is. And so I do see Georgia Equality and people who look like us. And that's the thing, when you bring more Black and brown folks into a space, we can highlight these issues that we are very aware of in our communities. And so I do see Georgia Equality is stepping up as being a leader in making sure that we reform criminal justice issues, so people who love like us and look like us can also be free in that space as well. So those are some of the things. And I think in the grand scheme of things, if I think about 25 years from now, so if I had kids, they would be adults. I would, I would hope that so much of the sadness and the fear that oftentimes queer people walk around with, that will have dissipated, and that we will have created together a state and a world where my adult children would feel free to be exactly who they are and to love whomever they're called to love.
Yeah, and I'm just echoing y'all because y'all are like so fabulous. But so definitely, I do want to see in the next 25 years that we have more intentional change, so that leadership does look like who the people are living in Georgia, What I always tell people wherever I go to is that Georgia, and specifically Atlanta, is the Black gay mecca. So a lot of Black LGBT queer folks move here. So it makes no sense to me that why do we have all these Black LGBT people here, but we don't have them in leadership positions? So I hope in 25 years, organizations like Georgia Equality are actually out doing the work and instilling leadership qualities into these folks so they can step into these roles. And in addition, I know that a lot of legislation, a lot of policies are being passed that target specific groups, transgender people or women with their choice to choose. So I hope all of that is gone and everybody can feel safe and protected, because that has a lot to do with how folks feel in power and how they show up into places. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, oh, can I just add, like, imagine what Atlanta would be like when we have our like first Black gay mayor. I'm not sure how we haven't gotten there already, but like, I mean, that's coming for us. Like, that is the future of Atlanta. There will be a first Black queer candidate and ultimately mayor, and then there will be others who follow, and at some point we won't even be counting what number they are anymore. That's the things that I'm looking forward to seeing in the next 25 years, to really live to see all of those first happen and then no longer even be an issue.
Right. So things can stop being a first and it can start being the new norm. So
Exactly.
the first Black gay something. So maybe you're speaking that into me and I become the first Black trans mayor of Atlanta. Let's just speak that.
Speak into existence.
Because once we open that door, we're not going to close it behind us. So
That's
you
right.
might be second. We might be someone already in the pike, and all over, not just Atlanta. And you said the word count, Kim, which is, I mean, we have a census coming up, and this is not a non-political thing, but we must be counted, you know, as people, but as cis and trans people, as people of color, as Black people, as NB people, we must be counted. And so in 25 years, we'll have done 2.5 censuses, whatever that is, and we must represent. And if we don't, that's going to be the key to why we don't have what we deserve and why we're not representing who we are. And so it's just, and Georgia Equality has taken the lead on that as well, because we want to be intersectional, as you know, because if we're not doing it for all of us and doing it intentionally correctly for all of us, we're going to have to do it again. We don't have that kind of time.
Yeah, I think I love to like put a pin in that point on the census, because when you talk about representation, when we talk about access, I mean, Georgia has the largest Black population numbers wise in the United States. When you have that voice represented, particularly with our strong history of historically Black colleges, our long history of Black leadership, we're beginning to get a history of Latinx and AAIP leadership. I mean, I think that we should definitely make sure that we're counted in the best way so that we can export our voice across the nation, right? So when we go up to Capitol Hill, we even locally here in our state offices, it's very important. I can tell you as a person who's been at the Capitol for a long time, it is extraordinarily important for people in rural Georgia who don't think that they know anybody who's LGBTQ or who's out or who's just living their life. Just having someone sit next to them who exhibits those characteristics makes a huge change. I cannot tell you enough about when Carla Jenner was first elected, how she was treated as opposed to how Simone was treated when she came in, right? I mean, it was not that long in between the two, but because Carla was there, Simone was able to be treated a little bit better than she probably would have. And thus, you know, the results of elections and the results of legislation changes. I mean, legislation changes when people know people. And when people see that people aren't, you know, these caricatures, that they're real living, breathing human beings who, you know, have just very minor, really differences between them and the person sitting next to them. That is huge for an elected official to see. So yeah, I can't wait for that to be in our future as Georgia Equality in the state of Georgia. I'm excited for it. So what are your hope? Well, let me say this, 25 years from now, since we're talking about the future in 2045. So I can't even imagine how old I'll be in 20, I don't even want to think about it. What are the signs of success going to be in 2045? How would you know this movement has been a success 25 years in the future?
It'll be a success when, again, I see people like me, or like my mother, or like my grandmother, or whomever in leadership positions. And then when I do a lot of like ground level work with individuals who maybe experience homelessness or addiction, when those are actually places for them to go and get the resources and help that we need. We have a lot of institutions, we have a lot of places that provide help, but they don't provide help for anyone. So I feel like anybody who's coming into Atlanta should be afforded every opportunity and every tool and resource so they can be their best selves. But at that point, we don't have it right now. So in 25 years, I do want to see that. And then also, just full disclosure, I am from, originally from Warner Robins, Georgia. The majority of my family is in Sparta, Georgia. And I love the country. And I feel like if I had the opportunity to stay at home and do the same work, or to stay at home and be afforded the same opportunities as my peers, then I would have. So I don't want anybody to feel in 25 years that they have to move away from their home or move to the city so they can be able to work or access healthcare. I want to be at home. So in 25 years, I hope to be at home with my white picket fence, and all of my children or grandchildren, whether they're queer or not, are enjoying all of the resources and living their best possible lives. So.
Houston County rules, yes. All about but I would, in 25 years, on top of everything else, we'll be, probably re-electing our, a Black trans woman for president. I hope so. We'll be in re-election mode, but we also will not have to stop and explain ourselves.
Yeah.
This is why we're doing this here. This is why this is going on. It will be taught in schools, for one thing. It will be, people will be teaching it at home before kids go to school. People will, because we need to know what our history is, and how we got here. But we don't have to stop and have the conversation all the time, which is what we're doing. This is, we still have to fight for this job. And we have to fight to not be the last person in there. We have to fight to be seen as, you're hiring me because I deserve this, not because, you're checking something off. And if I have it, you cannot say to someone else that I am a diversity hire or something like that. We will have gotten past that, and it's not going to come easily. It's going to come because we are intentional about what we're doing, but also because we showed up. We showed up every single day, and people got used to us. They can't drive us away. They may as well get used to us, and they may as well love us. But even if they don't love us, we are here, and that's what I want it to be. I want it to be that learning curve, because it's such a burden every day to have to walk in a certain way, smile a certain way, not be threatening, not be this, do that, and just to get through your day. I want less stress on the people that are here in 25 years. It's going to be us, but the people that come behind us.
Yeah, I second all of that. I want to live in a world where I don't have to worry that if I decide to be a little butch that day, that might cause harm to my physical body if I go out somewhere, right? And I want to live in a world where people don't struggle with pronouns, where they just accept the pronouns that you offer and roll with it. It's not a question. 25 years from now, I want to live in a world where kids who are feeling I think I'm queer, that's okay, that it's not something that scares them. And as a person of faith, I want to live in a world where people don't have to hunt and search to find a religious community that will accept them as a trans person, as a non-binary person, as a queer person. I want to live in a world where if you want to exercise your religious beliefs, no matter the tradition, that there is a community and that there are lots of communities that are right there ready to receive you, that are led by people who look like you and love like you. Like, to me, I mean, maybe that can't happen in 25 years because religion is really slow, but to me, like that's the world I'm trying to create. That's the world that I want to be a part of, is that place where we all feel free to be who we are, and that we can bring our full selves, church or our mosque, into our schools, into every institution that we go to, that we can bring our full selves and know that people aren't going to judge us or hate us just because of what they think or who they think we love.
Yeah. Well, thank you, ladies. That was the last of my questions. So thank you all. I would like to, if there's any final word that anyone would like to say, I would love to give y'all an opportunity to say any final statement or final quotes or words of wisdom.
So my final thought is that the best opportunity that has ever been given to me is because somebody invested into me and poured into me and actually brought me to Georgia Equality to be an intern. So I would tell anybody, invest in somebody that doesn't look like you or doesn't identify as you or doesn't love like you, because that person can actually be tomorrow's leader and change the world. So do that.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
And I just want to say it's been such an honor to be on this panel with you all. I'm so grateful to have you in my life in this space right now. And I acknowledge that the C4 table for the C4 group for Georgia Equality, they're doing the work of helping us realize these things that we talked about. I was a first-time candidate who I did not realize I would be the first out LGBTQ senator when I signed up to run, but Georgia Equality knew that. And you all poured into me, you invested in me and in my campaign. And we did something together that I think most people didn't think was possible in Georgia. We took a district that is majority African-American, majority people of color, and incredibly religiously devoted people. We took that district and we won with an out lesbian candidate, which lets us know so much is possible in Georgia across the state. And so I want to thank Georgia Equality for investing in me. My wife and I are happy and excited to be hosts along with so many others in this Georgia Equality Invest, because we know how important this work is. And so I hope that others will join us in investing in Georgia Equality as Georgia Equality invests in making Georgia such a much better place and brings equality for us all.
I just wanted to say, look at this panel, look at us. This is fantastic. This is the highlight of my day. It might be the highlight of my 2020, and not because 2020 has been bad. It's just that, look at us. We're representing Georgia Equality. We're representing Georgia. And this should not be novel. This is the way it is. And I've never felt more comfortable. I've never felt more worthy. I've never felt more that this is exactly where I need to be. I'm so grateful to be here with Justine and Kim, and of course you, Kenyatta. This is just a wonderful way to cap off Georgia Equality's 25th year and launch it to the 50th.
Well, thank you. Thank you all so much. I just want to give this opportunity to thank everyone who's joined us virtually. And to let them know that we have sponsors, and we have a list of sponsors on our website. And you can also become a sponsor of Georgia Equality at www.georgiaequality.org/invest. We do wonderful work at Georgia Equality. You can go on our website and peruse everything that we help with the community, from AIDS, HIV work to education to changing the laws in the state of Georgia so that we are all much more comfortable living here. And I know that so much of what we do at Georgia Equality is due to the ladies on this panel. So thank you all. And y'all have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
This is great, guys.
Thank you so much for watching our panel, our roundtable today. I'd like to again thank all of the ladies who joined us. And I want to thank all of you for staying with us and watching. This year, as you all know, because of COVID, we were unable to have Evening for Equality. but we still need your resources. We still need your assistance so that we can do all the good work that we do across the state of Georgia. As you know, Georgia is not Atlanta alone. We work in all 159 counties and the hundreds of cities across the state. We work to prevent bullying. We work to elect fair-minded officials. We work to educate those officials on our issues. And we also work for HIV and AIDS outreach. We do many, many more things, and we can do that and even more with your help. To support Georgia Equality, you can go online to www.georgiaequality.org/invest and invest in your community today. Thank you.